jumps online. Leslie Warburton should be our guide, but I will drive for the moment. So welcome to our session, COPDESS session, and we will be kicked off by Brooks Hanson. Here's our agenda. Welcome and orientation, followed by Danny Kincaid speaking about the amazing workflow she's been working on. And then future planning for COPDESS will be just under an hour, and we will have a discussion. And Kirsten, oh, there you are, I see. Oh, yay. Okay, good. Hey, Kirsten. And then Brooks will end us all with next steps.
Thanks, Shelley.
Is there a slide for your welcome and orientation? Let me go peek.
No, there's not. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I can't actually see you all. I'm in the car, actually, but that emphasizes in partly how important this meeting is, that some of us are taking it remotely and coming back from travel and personal time. So I think this is a really important meeting. We're gonna, as Shelley said, kind of both review a little bit of what we've done, but most important, plan a few activities for the future and plan to elevate COPDESS. This is a really, as we'll talk about in some of the short presentations, I feel a really great and important time for the activities that COPDESS has been working on, and for future impact and future impact in fair data and publishing. And in particular, as we'll talk about, this effort needs publishers and repositories working together, as we have been, but the opportunity to do so and to elevate the impact on open science and fair data and quality fair data is really great. So I'm really looking forward to the discussions and presentations today. So just a couple of housekeeping things. I think Shelley already mentioned that if you came in late, please add your name to the Google document so we can follow up and reach out to you. Note the community participation guidelines for the ESIP summer meeting, similar to most other meetings, and be polite, respectful, but engaged. And so let's start into the meeting. So the first, I'll turn it over to Danny, who will talk and kind of talk a little bit more about the refining the publisher researcher data workflow that she's been leading, that will help kind of put the framework for, it puts the framework on for all that we're working on. And following that, we'll have 3 lightning presentations that kind of set or orient what's happening both geopolitically, and that's the politics of earth and space science, and earth and space science, open science, and fair data around the world, because a lot is happening that sets the stage for how we might work together in the coming year or two. So thanks, and Danny, over to you.
Thanks, Brooks. Great multitasking there. Thank you so much for the intro. So for those who are new to this activity, I only have a few slides. We've been working on this activity since February 2019 or 2020, excuse me, and so we've kind of pushed it out at a couple of venues, several meetings, and so this is sort of a recap. And for those of you who are familiar with it, I'll try and make it as painless as possible and just give you an idea of where we're going from here. So this activity is titled Data Repository and Journal Workflows, Coordinating the Preservation, Scholarly Publication, Peer Review Process. And Shelley, if you could do the next slide. Thank you so much. And so to orient everyone and give you a little context here, this started back in 2020 with some Council of Data Facility webinars describing this problem between publication, this challenge between publication and scholarly publication and data publication. And to summarize it in a nutshell, really digging into the bottlenecks that arise between getting the data referenced in scholarly publications through the repository processing workflow and ready to have a DOI dropped into that scholarly publication. So this is, as you know, has become more mainstream of all publishers asking for those data DOIs in the scholarly publication. So we tried to figure out what we could do here to streamline that, or at least to alleviate this problem. Try and engage all the stakeholders from the data producer, the repository, and the publisher. And so down below, you kind of see that timeline of what we've vetted with the community. We originally started by looking at a model workflow, a visual schematic of the model workflows between all three of those stakeholders. And we realized that it really boiled down to a lot of communication, and to kind of dig into a representative workflow that had all of these stakeholders in swim lanes sort of context was really challenging given the high heterogeneity in all of their activities. So we started boiling it down to a list of recommendations, and that's what I'm presenting in the next 2 slides. And so in the time that we have, this 10 minutes that we have, I'd like to just present these recommendations. There's a set for publishers and there's a set for repositories, and just get feedback. I think we have the link to the slides, and several of you are in that slide deck. And so feedback can be provided in the slides. So Shelley, if you can jump to the next one. Here we have journal recommendations. If you've been with us throughout that timeline, you've seen these before. These aren't unfamiliar. And really it's helping authors to select that appropriate repository. There's been some activity on this already, and there continues to be activity on providing publishers with guidance on this in the RDA space. So that's one piece. Give the authors a sense of timing that the repositories need to curate. So providing a communication chain from data author through to repository, and really the expectations of the journal. So, and communicating back to the data author when the repository makes the data public, when the paper is actually accepted, when the DOI is needed, all that general timing of those specific activities, really helpful for the repository to know. Informing the repositories of the need of share links. So this is something that my own specific repository was unaware of, and yet something that should be relatively easy for repositories to implement. So there's 3 big takeaways on the journal recommendations, or recommendations for journals. And then the next one is for recommendations for repositories. And this really boils down to a confidentiality process, allowing those peer reviewers to access the data anonymously. And then, so providing that mechanism to do that, and then just explicitly stating at the repository level that this can be done, giving that assurance to the publishers that their anonymity is being provided by that repository. So really simple key communication pieces. We'd like to, from here, get your sort of last comments and thoughts on this. And then the ES, ESIG, and ESIP RDA interest group will propose this at VP 18 coming up this year to see if we can get this sort of endorsed by RDA. And so in the next slide, you'll see just an opportunity. There are 2 boxes there, and an opportunity for you to share your comments in there. And I welcome everybody's comments. You can also, let's see, I can put my my contact information in the chat as well. But please feel free. We welcome your ideas, thoughts, and comments. And if we have some time before we move on, we can even have open discussion time until that next topic.
This is Bruce. One quick comment. The double blind is going to be really hard for us to do.
Fair enough. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
The single blind, we've worked with people, but you've given me some thoughts about some stuff we can put up on that. But I don't know how to do double blind with the way we're structured. And I understand the value of it.
First, it's okay. There are other mechanisms to manage double blind. Like for instance, we can tuck a copy of the data into a temporary location that only the journal has access to, but it's not considered a citation or archival location. So there's other ways. Yeah. And Leslie Wyborn has joined us. If you'd like to jump in, Leslie. Bob, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah. So the big main issue we've been having is that a lot of publishers, a lot of researchers, put their data in Figshare or something and they get a DOI and use that in the review process. But then when they come to us, we're kind of stuck because we don't want to reissue a DOI for the exact same data. And it causes confusion when you proliferate them. So was that an issue that has been discussed? And
So Bob, can I ask you why they're going to Figshare or Dryad first? Is it?
Because a lot of people, put early versions and use it as a general storage for as they develop data and to get it up in time for the review process.
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons that started this activity in the first place, that for my repository as a domain repository, people were coming to us once they've submitted the manuscript and then saying, I need a DOI, basically tomorrow. And we couldn't meet that need. And so, part of this is maybe even pulling a third stakeholder into the process, or even just communicating that the data should be submitted to the domain repository before, or as soon as they're ready, research ready. So as soon as you're performing your analyses, if those data are research ready, you can submit them to the repository long before the publication or the manuscript is being drafted. So that's really one of the things we're trying to communicate to get the culture change across. But trying to make authors aware that there's a period of time, even once the manuscript is submitted, that the authors may not realize that we have time, the repository has time to go through its normal workflow and processing before the DOI is actually needed. We had gone to the journals and gotten them together through a COPDESS and AGU sponsored workshop that allowed us to sort of dig into the publisher's workflow and really highlight when the absolute, sort of drop dead decision point is for that, or that activity point is for the DOI. And so there's a lot of sort of wiggle room in there where we could be working toward processing those data in time. So that's really what we're trying to get at. I know some folks have talked about reserve DOI, but for us, that doesn't necessarily work out that well. And it doesn't always help the reviewers get to the data as it's being processed. It gets them a DOI for the publication, but the data don't resolve until we're finished with them. So that's really what we're trying to dig into.
Kirsten, I see you have your hand up. Yes, muted, Kirsten.
Sorry, I think Peng was first.
Okay.
I take my turn when
Oh, Peng, would you like to go
Thank
next?
you. Yeah, so I think for the DOI challenge, with the recommendations for journals to give a timing for both researchers and repositories, that would be helpful. My comments is that I have seen some of the repositories start to have a status of a data paper that's associated with the data set. For example, whether it's a peer reviewed or it's under review, that's a good indication in terms of the quality of that data set. And I wonder whether that's something that you might be considering to provide to other repositories.
So let me see if I'm understanding. You're saying that the data paper is something that you're,
Right.
can you
So
say
when
that?
the
Can you say that again?
when the people submit the data to the domain repository, and to demonstrate the scientific quality of data, they will submit a paper to publisher, like to journals. And a lot of times data might be already available publicly, but is under review. And if they don't put anything on their website, on repository website, people don't really know whether it's like a provisional or it's already being peer reviewed. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't know the practice across repositories. I know that our repository does have something that indicates that. I don't know how many others do, but that's certainly something that we haven't really considered or talked about in this process. So that might be an opportunity for basically just like a status of the data set. Is that what you're getting at? Or
Yeah,
that's the end
yeah.
product? Yeah.
It's a status, but it's a good quality indicator from my perspective. And for general users too.
Right. And I think that the ability to peer review, but also quality is probably something we didn't get into that in the scope of this. But I appreciate what you're saying.
In the interest of time, can we move on and just have a quick, we'll just take Kirsten and Nicholas's questions, but can we be quick, please, Kirsten?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment. So basically, since the FAIR principles got implemented with journals, we have in the repository actually gotten a lot of data sets. And so far, we have never had a reviewer ask us for access to the data. So I find that really is surprising. And I wonder if that has to do with the type of data that, there is still access to the data in the paper in geochemistry, that there are data tables or something that allow reviewers to look at that. And so that's just a perspective that, I would like to learn more from other repositories, how big the demand for reviewers is.
That's a really good point. I would corroborate exactly what you're saying, Kirsten. We don't have folks coming to us saying they need to review the data. What we have is the demand for the DOI at the end of the process.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's clearly there, right?
Yeah, but we're ready to make that capability, within the repository. Should that be allowed? I think it's something that's not a challenge for us, but and maybe those data, maybe those reviewers are already coming and just accessing public data.
I think that's the reason they just want a DOI, because the paper associated with the data, it's under review to be published.
Yeah. So please, I will say at closing with Kirsten's question, feel free to add any more comments in there. I really appreciate all of everybody's input and comments throughout this process, and look forward to reading through them. Thanks so very much.
I'll just add that I think, oh, sorry, go Danny, what did you want to say?
No, that's okay. I just saw one more hand go up, so I apologize.
Yeah. I think we need to move on to the next section, but I guess it's been really great to have all this discussion and feedback. And just so you're aware, as Danny said, we're taking this to the RDA, in part because if you go to RDA, you also get ready access to the commercial publishers. And I don't know whether you know, but we do have, I'm giving you a presentation on it. We do have in the showcase, we have the ESIP RDA Earth-Based Environmental Science Interest Group, and that enables you to take something to a much broader audience. And we're hoping to pass this through as a supplementary output. And because I think we've really woken the tiger, poked the bear on this one. And it's just trying to raise awareness of the realities of what it means for you to store the data with the paper so it's meaningful. But I also would just like to pick up on Bob's comment about things going to Zenodo and Figshare, where it doesn't necessarily get the domain quality repository. And yeah, I cringe a lot of times at seeing data going to some of these generic repositories. But to me, the bottom line is at least it's off the C drive, at least it's off the thumb drive. And we've got it somewhere where in time we can then do something with it. But ideally, I think we need repositories like BecoDemo, Iris, EarthChem and that, where our data is validated, the content is checked, and then it's truly interoperable and fair. But these are the stumbling blocks that we're coming up with when we first started this process with the AGU-led FAIR project. What was it, 2 or 3 years ago? So now I want to move on to the next section, and I must admit, planning the future of what we're going to do in this group, which is the Coalition of Publishing of Data in the Earth and Space Sciences. And one of the problems when you think about it really is this triangle is the repositories, the publishers, and the researchers. And can someone tell me where there's actually a group or a conference around that deals with this? Okay, because the publishers don't traditionally come to ESEP. But if we go to RDA, we do get some repositories and publishers, but not necessarily the researchers. And we have traditionally met face-to-face at EGU and AGU because the publishers are there because of the showcases that each of these conferences run. And so we feel that our home in ESEP is great, and we were really pleasantly surprised at the last ESEP meeting where we had quite a number of attendees, and we've got 70 in this session. In a way, being virtual does make it easier for us to try and connect and bring in the publishers. We certainly do get the repositories and some researchers when we're in the ESEP environment. And so now what we want to do is get you people to put your thinking caps on and help us plan the future of COPDESS. So, oh yeah, Helen's put in the chat, some publishers do attend EGU. Yes, I agree with you, but then we don't necessarily get all the repositories. So this is partly why we're here. And then someone's put a comment about the journal editors. That's another thing we're very conscientious about, is that you can engage the publishers, but you don't necessarily engage the editors. The editors do tend to be with the research community, which is why you get engagement at things like EGU and AGU. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Shelley. And I'm just going to give a really quick talk on some international activities that are going on and really high level. Kirsten and Brooks will then also give introductions. And the plan is to break you all into random breakout groups where we all discuss the same questions and just see what we get back from all of you as feedback as to how we should go forward and what we should focus on. And it's really great to see what is happening through the US government, and Brooks provided this slide. And so you've got these key documents coming out: US Innovation and Competition Act, the US House version of the National Science Foundation for Future Reconciliation and Infrastructure Bills with dollars for climate change, climate solutions, and the OSTP on infrastructure, likely advertising next on open science, with priorities on integrity, climate change, and equity. And the agencies are aware of it and getting ahead. I did manage to, from Australia, participate in one of these sessions. And what really got me was I was in a room with both government and researchers and research repositories. And there was an effort to start to move forward together. And as there are key new hires in the US government in climate change. And so what this means is science is getting on the agenda. If you're talking about open science, then you have to have access to data. And so we're starting to see that. Next, please, Shelley. It means that there's increasing recognition in the US of the need for and support for environmental monitoring and data and technology. It's increasing recognition of we need infrastructure to support repositories and FAIR. And importantly, which is what we're on about, is that replicability and reproducibility when you're supported by FAIR data, and future capabilities around machine learning, all of which require access to data that is in machine readable formats. We're not there yet, but the higher level conversations and awareness are happening. Now, from Europe, next slide, please. Helen has provided this one on key European data-focused initiatives. The European Commission on Strategy for Data recognises data as an essential resource for economic growth, and the aim to create common European data spaces, which Helen assures me will be both for government and the research repositories, and ensure that data becomes more available for use in the economy and society. And the regulation on European data governance that will empower users to stay in control of their data. There's also the European Green Deal, which transforms into a modern and resource-efficient economy to make Europe the first climate neutral continent in the world. So this again means that science is getting high on the agendas. And so next slide, please. I hope there aren't too many Australians in this audience. Oh, sorry. What Helen is also saying is that this Destination Earth, which aims for a high precision digital model of the Earth to monitor and simulate natural and human activity, and realising the European data strategy and Green Deal, and based on a cloud federated model. So you've got these high level things that are starting to come together, which are putting data high on the agenda. And therefore, this is what ties into access to data and researchers publishing and releasing their data. And for Australia, next slide, please. We don't have the policies yet, so I'm not going to say too much. They're starting to come, but we're nowhere near as advanced as what is happening in the US and Europe. There is a current review going on called the National Research Infrastructure Roadmap, and that's just in a preliminary phase. I'm really hoping a lot will come out of that in its report in October, where already they've been around to all the research groups and data is high on the agenda, places for data. But again, as Danny's talk showed, having places for data is not enough. We really need to work hard to make sure that data, when it is released, is usable and reusable in machine format. So I'll now pass on to the next speaker, which will be Kirsten. Okay, so can we move on to Kirsten's slide?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to what Leslie and basically information from books already presented. Just I wanted to start off with basically emphasizing what Leslie already said, that COPDESS is really the only organization at the moment that functions on an international level, is earth science focused and connecting repositories, publishers and funders and researchers actually on that level. But obviously COPDESS, it has been around, was founded in 2014, and we've had quite a number of activities, but it is, as many of the organizations we have, a volunteer organization, and we need to figure out where COPDESS is going to be going. We had several years ago decided that by becoming a cluster in ESIP, we would be able to continue on with our discussions. But in general, the landscape of earth science activities has obviously evolved over those years, and that's basically giving us a good timing now to look at what can we do in the future for COPDESS to stay relevant, to get some level of support for continuing to do its activities, be it meetings, be it these webinars, workshops, and so on, and where do we want to go, where do we want to put our focus. So I think we can see, and those were fantastic slides that Leslie presented there. This ecosystem of earth science data infrastructure is really moving forward in the context of national and international data infrastructures that are becoming more relevant every month, every year. There are currently various national, regional, international earth science data infrastructures under development or already existing, and I just wanted to name a few here, like the National Research Data Infrastructure for Earth in Germany, the European Plate Observing System has a data infrastructure, OSCOPE. In the US, we have various science activities that have their own data infrastructures set up, but we also have our Council of Data Facilities. There are other efforts going on, science-focused, for example, the Deep Time Digital Earth, which is a large or big science program supported, sponsored by the IOGS. And all of these efforts, nearly all of them, whenever I attended webinars or talks, COPDESS came up because everybody is looking for guidance, how to treat data, how to make them fair, how to establish the links between data and publications, and so on. But another aspect of all of this, I think, is also the increasing interdisciplinarity of our research. And while we're focusing on earth science and our activities, the question is how much we should open up the doors to other disciplines that are actually doing collaborative, doing interdisciplinary research with the earth sciences. So another important aspect that I wanted to refer to is that in the US, here at least, the earth science data activities, major activities are in transition. And that is largely because the NSF EarthCube program that funded projects, governance, and various activities, annual meetings for 10 years is ending next year, which has triggered a flurry of activities to identify options for making these activities more sustainable, that there is ongoing community interaction, support, dialogue going on for these solutions. And in that context, already the mention of ESIP has come up. Where does the Council of Data Facilities find its home? Is it its own organization, or should we also partner with ESIP in many ways? So that kind of provides a bit of context, I hope, for the discussion that we want to have now on how is COPDESS going to work in the future? What should its focus be? Should it partner up with other organizations? Does it need to be its own organization, or how can otherwise the activities that COPDESS had taken on, where it has made an impact, how can they continue potentially? Okay, with that, I'll stop. And I don't know if Leslie or Shelley is going to continue.
Next slide, please, Shelley. So we just thought we'd hand over to Brooks now for some pearls of wisdom on how can we position COP to coordinate these to create impact. Brooks?
Okay, thanks, Leslie, Kirsten, Helen, for all that information. Let me sum up, and let me just add one thing, which I think is the research community is also starting across almost all sectors in the earth and space sciences to recognize this and the importance of fair data. One of the things for another project, we just did a search of how often machine learning is used in AGU abstracts, and it's grown from 0.5% to well to about 4%, and we expect it to be about 5% this year, just in 4 years. And the trajectory seems like it's going up and up. And really, you know, what's that machine learning on? It's on high quality data. So let me just summarize. When COPDESS started, it was kind of interesting. We took in the very first meeting to get the discussion going, we took the problem of funding off the table because it was too thorny of a problem. And frankly, there wasn't a lot of progress on funding domain repositories at the time. There were many funded, but they're often hand to mouth, going back and forth for continued grants, and wondering how to scale up. And as Kirsten has talked at other times, and Danny as well, you know, the scaling up that's being caused by our work and the fair data work has been a challenge for the repositories. But so I think that one of the important messages from the slides that Leslie showed is that finally funding and the realization for a robust and secure fair data infrastructure to support open science and to support the science to society connections that are needed, as well as to support things like machine learning, continued research, environmental monitoring, is on the table. And it's on the table through the political system is recognizing it, the scientific leadership is recognizing it across the board. So that's kind of the, you know, and it's on the point of, you know, the authorization bills that are moving through, for example, for NSF alone are billions of dollars. So it's not pocket change that is being recognized, that finally this robust infrastructure is needed, and we need to support it. How we do this is still, I think, to be determined. How the funding agents support it, how institutions are involved, and how we do it is a big question that hopefully we can contribute to. So, and as Kirsten mentioned, there's other dynamics going on within the Earth and Space Science data funding that's also in transition. The second point is, thanks to your work on COPDESS and other efforts, obviously ESIP has been important, RDA, many other organizations, but the Earth and Space Sciences have been generally leading this and setting an example. Not the only one, there's been other work going on in other communities, but as a large publisher repository community, it's fairly unique. And so I think we're very well positioned to provide and the things that Danny mentioned, for example, are not unique to the Earth and Space Sciences, but provide guidance on exactly how this infrastructure and data work will proceed and should proceed. And not only are we well positioned, a lot of the effort, because of the need to address climate change and environmental monitoring in detail, is going to be focused on the Earth and Space Sciences. So I think we're well positioned to, and a community like COPDESS is needed to provide advice and thoughts going forward. So those are the two, that's why I said at the introduction, I thought this is a really special time and moment and opportunity. And I think the rest of this meeting is how can we take advantage of that and start to organize and provide answers to that. And I think Kirsten framed a lot of the questions very well, but I think we'll have a little chance for you all to provide that input and thinking in the rest of the session. So I'm very excited. Thanks for being here and participating and having kind of these big thoughts for today. So thanks a lot.
Okay, next slide, please. Well, we want to have concurrent breakout sessions. And before I start, I'm noticing that there are 66 participants. The reason I'm saying that is I was at a conference last week, and when we went into breakout sessions, everyone disappeared. So I'm hoping that's not going to happen here. That's a terrible joke to say loosely. But we're going to just randomly assign you. Now, I know these breakouts will be a bit big. Megan, we can take 22 in each breakout. Is that okay, Megan?
Yes, that's not a problem.
Okay, good. Thanks, Megan. And so really we want to hear from you. And I think it was great what Danny presented towards us, for us at the start, because that's telling us that, look, there are issues with this. But in a way, when a researcher publishes their data, that's where we've got the opportunity to capture it, to make sure that it's QA/QC'd, etc. We've got a long way to go. So if we could go back to the slide, please. Shelley, we've lost the slides.
I just put the text in the chat.
Oh, okay, thanks. So we're going to randomly assign you to groups, and you'll either end up with myself, Kirsten, or Helen. Who do you think we should engage in this COPDESS going forward? How can we maximize our impact? And what are the priority topics this cluster should focus on? And can I ask each breakout leader to come back with 5 key points, and you can put them in the slide deck because I've got a slide for each one. Now, Shelley, your timekeeper, how long have we got to have on these breakouts? Because we have to tell Megan now.
We
Looks like we might need to shorten a little.
maybe somebody could help me with what the time is.
The time is 4:44 Eastern, so we have 46 minutes left in the session, and you wanted 15,
Okay, so let's
20
do.
minutes for afterwards.
Sorry, we wanted 40, did we?
Well, you have 20 minutes of things after the breakouts in your agenda.
Okay, so let's have
26 minutes.
let's do a 20-minute 20-minute breakout, and Megan will now randomly assign you. Oops, our numbers are already going down. 62.
Oh, don't go. I'm
Don't
opening
leave,
them.
don't leave.
Kiko Chat smartly mutes all of us when we return, I see.
Okay, so oh, hi Aaron. Haven't seen you in a while. So oops, we will now go through the breakout sessions. Looks like I've landed being number 1 group, and I haven't been able to to type into the slides. So
Me either. This this was a bit too challenging.
okay, so in the chat, I've just put our breakout room notes. I'll just quickly go through who should we engage. Apart from publishers, researchers, repositories, someone said we need to engage higher level people in our organisations to make them aware that this is something that is valuable. We need to engage funders to make sure the repositories are adequately funded to handle the increased workload. It's not just enough to engage the publishers, you need the editors and the researchers who peer review. And we engage those in government federal strategies. To maximise impact, we felt that we need to inform the publishers that peer review of the data by the data repositories, not just having a DOI from a generalist repository, but let the publishers realise that by taking care of the data and reviewing it is contributing to the value of the articles that they are publishing. And oh my God, what topics should we focus on first? We need to create a conversation with the publishers on what is really needed to get a better understanding of what publication means for the data to be interoperable and reusable. Quite a few people felt that we should be coordinating between the repositories and the publishers, particularly the small ones who feel that getting Core Trust Seal is it. Well, it's not. And they're getting picked off by the big publishers. And one repository complained that it's easy to get Zenodo or the generalist repositories listed on the publisher lists, but the ones that actually do full domain curation are struggling to get there. We need to pick up on Kirsten's comment of nobody's asking for a copy of the data for peer review. So that's something that's got to come back into the peer review process. But again, if we do that, it's going to be an impact on the voluntary nature of peer review and create more work. And yeah, so again, we're sort of saying that enabling peer review of data is going to have a cost. Okay, so we'll pass off now on to group 2. I think that's you, Kirsten.
Oh dear, yes. I'm still on. I had the same issue that I couldn't copy. Who should we engage? I think there's a lot of overlap to what you said. We also talked about the relevance of engaging with editors, but we also talked about the need for involving the general data repositories, institutional repositories, and so on. Libraries. A very important comment to me was that we should involve leading PIs in the field that kind of act as exemplary researchers, because they really understand where the needs are and where challenges are. Somebody mentioned the engagement of museums, which brought me, as many of you can imagine, immediately to the physical sample repositories and so on, where, you know, clearly COPDESS has talked about the citation of samples, and as part of the whole discussion on reproducibility, replicability, so access to these physical objects is part of this whole ecosystem that we should be doing. So far about the engagement, I think it was also mentioned that practitioners in the whole field of repository evaluation and so on, like Core Trust Seal, should definitely be involved. About maximizing impact, there was quite a bit of focus, I think, on and that was mentioned by Leslie as well, on basically involving institutions, involving the universities, the management of universities, but also reaching out to get sort of a pipeline to graduate students and to early career scientists to learn about practices and resources in many ways. What else did we have? Definitely also exploring how, you know, large scale search engines, and it was brought up, the Google data set search and so on, can help in the linking between data and publications, and thus, you know, adopt maybe some of the recommendations that come out of COPTESS discussions in that context. We thought about success stories, particular people who are seen as leaders in the fields. Yeah, what else? And, you know, some of the discussions in maximizing impact actually led us into topics that could be taken as priorities. And something there was to have the metrics of data access and data use more clearly implemented, so that researchers can see what, you know, how the data have been accessed, not only the formal citations. But talking about metrics in general, I think should be high on the agenda, which also brings us back to the issue of citations still, that has gone on in COPTESS, but still needs a major focus in that, you know, we mentioned that it's still a problem to try and cite every resource that was used properly, and then the editor coming back and saying, well, sorry, your citation list is too long. So there are topics that, you know, even though we have discussed them for quite a while, are still a problem in many journals. I think and I don't want to put myself out there, but it was something that I thought is actually a really important issue for COPTESS to have more impact, is to actually have a better integration, a better connection with the editors and publishers. And we did a quick survey of how many editors were in the breakout room and how many researchers who are data generators and you know, data submitters were in the room. And we are a very siloed group right now in this environment. And so I think that's another issue that we need to address as a high priority, to actually function more on the intersection of these different audience and different stakeholders. Okay.
All right. That's great. Helen, would you like to tell us what went on in breakout 3, please?
Yeah, sure, Leslie. I'm just going to quickly drop the link to the notes in the chat. There we go. Okay, so actually, I think a number of the things that we've already heard from the other 2 breakout groups came out or were alluded to in the discussions we had in the 3rd group. One of the key things around who we should engage with, I think there was a general feeling in our group that we really wanted to seek to engage across all stakeholders, from researchers through to funding agencies. We had a bit of a discussion around the role of researchers in this landscape, and I think it was observed that researchers tend to follow instructions for publishers from their publishers. So maybe we need to focus on guidance around data citations or use of repositories. But I think the other discussion that we did have was about how we engage with those stakeholders. We had a brief discussion around meetings and how they should be, how they should be initiated. Brooks mentioned the meeting that Kirsten, you organised in Oxford. I can't remember how many years ago that was now.
2015.
But it was a no, Kirsten, don't tell me that. It can't be that long ago.
It is.
But I think one of the key things that came out of the discussion was how successful those meetings were in bringing all of the stakeholders to the table. Because if we have these meetings co-located with AGU, EGU, then we don't tend to get all of the stakeholders that we'd like to bring to the table. And I think that did come out of the initial introductory presentations as well. And it was suggested that maybe COPDESS should look to have an advisory committee so that we could have a call for advisors to the research community to encourage them to engage more broadly with COPDESS. And I think I particularly liked that as an idea, because it's a way of bringing those missing groups, those missing stakeholders to the table. So we talked a little bit about how can we maximize the impact of COPDESS. And one of the things that we talked about was about engaging institutional repositories, whether they're academic, government, etc., but also looking at, are there opportunities for COPDESS to actually really be involved in funding opportunities? So, for example, Leslie talked about some of the initiatives that are happening in Europe at the moment around Destiny Earth, the new data management strategy, and maybe we need to look at, is there a role for COPDESS within some of these proposals? I would argue yes. I'm actually involved in writing one of the proposals at the moment, and COPDESS has come up in that discussion. So I think maybe we need to think about, can COPDESS engage more formally within the context of some of these calls. But I think the other thing that was very clear is that we do need to leverage activities such as RDA, which will allow endorsement of the COPDESS recommendations. And lastly, we talked about priority topics, and we came back to stakeholders. And it was very much focused on, how do we identify and engage more fully with those stakeholders who are either not engaged with COPDESS or only partially engaged with COPDESS. And it was suggested that we need to increase the communication across these key stakeholders. But also, one of the things that came up that I was quite interested in was this idea of training for different stakeholders around the relevant topics and coordinating with other efforts, because I think this is something that could be quite powerful for COPDESS to build stakeholder engagement by increasing awareness and ensuring there is a full understanding of the issues across all of the different stakeholder groups. And I think the other thing that we also thought within this context was around the need to provide or gather leading practices and guidelines for repositories, researchers and publishers, and actually bring those together so people can actually access them and become better informed, even if they don't engage directly with some formal training. So I think that was all I had, unless I've missed anything critical from my group. So please, somebody wave at me if I've missed something important that they feel that I should have called out in my summary. Otherwise, I will thank everybody who was in my group. We got cut off because we got a bit late in the running of our session. So thank you everybody who contributed, and particularly to those who were writing the notes as well, because it was quite challenging trying to lead the discussion and write the notes. So thank you.
Okay, so look, just a quick one. We'll put it in the notes, but just Shelley has confirmed that they are in RDA going to start a data policy framework to try and address this different demands of different publishers on the repositories and come up with a common need. With 3 minutes left, Brooks, if you're still here, you were down to do the wrap up. So I will hand over to you if you're still here, or are you not?
No, I'm here. I finally made it home, so traffic wasn't too bad. So thanks everybody. There's a lot to digest here. A lot of both energy ideas, potential impacts that we can have. I think particularly on the how can we expand our impact and reach other stakeholders to bring in. There's clearly a need, if you put those two together, to really think about kind of disseminating, engaging the conversation to disseminate leading practices and find those key lever points that can amplify our work. So I think there's, so first of all, I think the documents are open. If you have other ideas, you know, if you wake up at 2 in the morning and say, oh, I wish I had put this in there, please do so. Don't just leave. And I think we'll digest all of this and take it back and try to get a report back to everybody. Maybe a slight synthesis of all of this, and give you some of our thinking on next steps to, again, get your feedback. Clearly, there's an energy and a value in getting together. And now that that's happening again, that's something we might seek to do with the right stakeholders, plural. It might be a couple get-togethers, but with some relevant stakeholders to have an actionable agenda. And as I said at the beginning, I think this is a really special time where the potential for leadership and proper impact is going to be really important. And I think that's a group that, we're a pretty unique group in building this conversation between publishers, repositories, and hopefully can give some input. I don't even want to say advice to kind of the funding agencies and the other government regulatory agencies that can help us and help the community all work together on this exciting times. So thank you all. Leslie, anything else? Leslie?
No, only
Others?
somebody. Yeah, no, look, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming. It's sort of interesting how since we've gone virtual, our numbers have gone up. And it's been great to get all your contributions, and we'll certainly digest them and work out how to take this forward. I think there seems to be agreement that we keep going, and that is placed in ESIP offices is unique, and we need to capitalize on it and keep going. Okay, thank you, everyone.
My impression as well that, there is a lot of energy and a lot of ideas and clearly a lot of impact to be realized by continuing. So thanks, everybody.
And thanks to Yusuf for hosting again. And Megan, especially for behind the scenes work, I'm sure.
Thank you all.